Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I'm SocioPsycho, and today we're going to take a look at Kisima Ingitchuna. Probably not said right, but it boils down to never alone. This is Mob Reviews, and we will be asking the question and answering, is it good and is it worth your time? First though, what is it? This is a cultural art piece told in a story form with a platforming element. The story comes from the natives of northern Alaska who have been living there for 1,000 years, and this is one of the stories that they pass down in a video game form. It has a cultural aspect which is pretty interesting. And we'll start with the options menu. Now the options are pretty simplistic and you don't have a way to rebind the keys, and that's a little unfortunate. Although there's not too many, I would have liked to see rebinding of the keys. When we jump into settings, in the video settings you have a large berth of screen resolutions, which is definitely nice. The game runs at 30 frames per second here and there, but once you actually get into the game it runs at 60 frames per second for about 90%. I have not had any tearing, clipping, or crashing during my playtime. The only issue that I've experienced is some minor movement structural issues. It makes the player feel like they're moving through 6 feet of snow instead of walking on top of the snow, and it didn't happen often. It was very subtly, so it wasn't too big of a deal, but that's really the only issue that I have during my playthrough on performance. You have full screens, subtitles as you can see, VSync, and quality. The game is actually pretty nice looking. It's not anything that is eye-poppingly gorgeous, but it has an atmosphere that's just truly beautiful, an atmosphere that conveys a sense of passion and wonder and power at the same time. A storm, yet the way the story ties into the visualization, you really have this sense of togetherness in a way. In the audio, everything's split up on different sliders. That's definitely nice to see. It has great music. The storytelling of the game is actually done pretty well. It goes into a manner of village elder. So it's not a big blockbuster game. You don't have Morgan Freeman who's telling the story and you're like, oh wow, you're just gonna carry it away on your voice. But the story is told by an elder, and it helps convey this sense of culture, and that's the whole point. The story is based upon a cultural story passed down throughout the ages, and being told by the elder, it definitely conveys that sit around and listen to somebody speak and tell a story, not turn on the TV and watch something. And it really does hit a certain chord during your gameplay. Music is done very well and perfects an emotional connection during the events, and you have cultural insights. And we'll go into what cultural insights are in a second. You do have the availability for player 1 or 2 as the game is a co-op game, and you do have controller options as well, or you can just stick to the keyboard. The game also has a large variable of languages, so you can definitely play it in a wide berth. Now when we talk about the story, there's two aspects to the story. The first aspect of the story, which is the actual in-game story, the actual playing of the world and of the story and how the character progresses through the game, is done rather well. Now you also have cultural insights, which is a mixture of talking to people about the culture and understanding the area and the world that the society in this story is brought to you from, but also what the developers were hoping to accomplish in showing. They've done a really good job on explaining the aspects and the culture of where the origin of the story came from, and you unlock these little clips by collecting owls throughout the game. They're pretty easy to find, they're not all that complicated, they're not hidden away in some secret location. On my first playthrough I was able to get 22 out of 24, it wasn't an issue at all. They are actually done very well, and it's like a documentary of sorts. Now when we talk about the story in the game and the cultural story of the game are one and the same. So you're not some major hero coming from outer space to save the world or the village or the town. It ties into a moral aspect of tradition of seeking the truth, finding community, and doing what you can to make life better. So the story, as it progresses forward, you learn about the culture of not only the people in the game and the character that you're playing, but also the origins of a cultural insight from real life. It is very insightful, and it does have emotional connection or pivot points where you find it like, oh wow, that was really interesting. Or you may feel some human emotions of terror or bliss or excitement. happiness, distress, as the gameplay does pace and pick up rather well with the story. You're being chased here, you have to figure out this platforming puzzle segment. The story is relayed pretty well, and I'll let you hear the story in-game aspect first with the picture book-esque storytelling, and after that I'll let you see the documentary aspect of the cultural insight, which you have availability to unlock, the 24 of them.
Sumitemma. Niveaksiarualukamuniallatuneqsaq. Aasiisuraqallabluни supayaanik. Inyuneahuting anuqqautigaisi anuhulingailliaqsuq anuhulingailliaqpaalluni kisaimma panirnialiaqsiput niviaqsiaqalualuk kisaimma isummeqtoq tapuraasi kangitsaquaqsigaasummat anuhulisugurukumagaan summan anuhulingailliaqamagaan tapuraasi kangitsaquaqsigaasumman anuhulisugurukumagaan.
So a recurring type of character in Inupiaq stories is the manslayer, and the manslayer is kind of this bad guy, and I think really what's at risk when the manslayer comes into story is the livelihood of individuals and the whole community. And so the manslayer is really used as a way to say, don't act only for yourself, always hold the community in your heart. Oftentimes in these stories there is one person that will stand up.
And what this humble person will represent, who faces that manslayer, is a return to order, a return to true living in the community. And it just takes that one person. It could just be that one person that can help to change everything. Because everyone wants to live a good life. Everyone wants to have a good community.
The platforming element of the game is done well. There are two aspects to the platforming of the game. Because it is a co-op optional game, but it also is a single player, the struggle with doing something is making sure that you have a difficulty high enough to engage two people to work sort of tandem together. Now you do have two characters and it ties well together into the story. One is a companion of the other. And if you're playing single player, which is perfectly fine, I didn't feel while I was playing single player that the puzzles were unfair or that the AI was stupid. The only issue I had with some of the areas due to it requiring two people is not being able to switch back fast enough. Obviously you can get through an area easier if you have two people versus one on the usual par. But when we look at the single player aspect and game element of it first, when you're running through, your companion makes the jumps they need to. They don't jump off a ledge if they don't need to, majority of the times. There was only one incident where my companion decided to leap off the side of a cliff, and I was just kind of like, whoops. I think I moved too far forward too fast, and then I stopped, and my companion decided to keep going. The platforming elements of the game do come into a give and take. They require the usage of both companions. One is a spirit, the other is the human girl. The human girl will be able to get certain places where the spirit won't, and vice versa. But it's the tandem work around and togetherness that really drives some of the puzzles and elements of the game. When you're playing with somebody else, there's going to be far more fluidity in the game, and it's done correctly. This is the type of game that if you enjoy playing a co-op style with somebody, definitely worth looking into. And as a single player, you still get all the cultural insights and an enjoyable story, and you don't feel like you're being cheapened. instead of relying on two people to go through, if you're playing by yourself, you do need to slow down, because there are certain areas that require the switching between one character to the other. Q will switch you to the spirit or back to the human. If you try rushing through everything as a single player, you're going to walk right into a puzzle trap and not figure out what's going on, where two people would be able to be moving and supporting each other to make decisions or call out to each other in an easier manner. So I didn't find that the platforming elements in the game were really all that hard. They were unique. They were actually pretty unique, and the art style of the game definitely helps propel that sense. There's this whole element of spirits in the world that are there to help you, and you are climbing them up, reaching new pinnacles of height, and it's an interesting motion and story. I found myself getting frustrated a little bit on single player because some of the puzzles didn't give you, I feel, enough reaction time. But at the same time, I don't feel that the platforming elements in the game were anything overly difficult. It just required understanding of the area or a faster reaction time to a situation going on. And you can expect that give and take in a co-op game. Because it is a co-op game, you're going to require a higher difficulty to entertain two people. So when you play it by yourself, you just have to be aware that it's going to be a little harder. Not unfair. I didn't find the game unfair, and that's very important to note. It had a unique atmosphere, and I didn't feel, for the most part, that I was repeating the same mechanics. I was maybe having to get through this water area, or I had to get to the top of this ledge. But I didn't find it to be repetitive. Some of the aesthetics were reused, and if a game was any longer than what it was, then I would have felt as if there was some dragging on. But I feel the length of the game, about 3 to 4 hours, hit the mark point, where if it didn't add any new mechanics and it kept going beyond that, then it would definitely get repetitive. So at the end of the day, when it boils down to it, this is actually a piece of art. The platforming is not anything that is overly difficult. If you're new to platforming, you'll be able to figure it out. If you have somebody else with you, then it will ease some of the burden even more. I found the single player element through the game to be fine. There were some minor issues with movement in the earlier stages of the game, where it felt like I was being slower as a human than I really needed to be, but nothing that was game breaking. It just slowed you down a little bit. It didn't crash it or anything else. The environment is tied directly into the story. The platforming is tied directly into the story. Everything, atmosphere, and relativity are put together great. And it definitely does embark on a tale of cultural insight and emotional curiosity, depending on the person, of course, different emotions, different people. And I found that my time in the game was well spent. I felt that the money I put forward to purchase this game was well worth it. And that's definitely nice to see. For a game that is around $13, the enjoyment factor that you get from this is worth it. So I can easily recommend this game, ladies and gentlemen, whether you're single player, ideal, or co-op minded. I thank you for listening and watching, and I hope this has been of help to you. I have been SocioPsycho, and I'll see you next time.